I will allow Dr. Pearson to make a short communication.
Thank you, Ms. Fairgrieve. It's with a little bit of mixed emotion that I tell everyone tonight that you may have heard that Dr. Chapman actually is going to be leaving the district at the end of the school year.
Allow Dr. Pearson to make a short. Okay.
Are we good to go? Yeah, that Dr. Chapman's actually going to be leaving us at the end of the year. He's taken a job in another district as their chief business officer, and we are really sad to see him go, but we wanted to take just a moment, since this is the Business Services Committee meeting, to say congratulations to him about this new opportunity, and that we will miss your leadership here in District 303, but know that you are going on to other opportunities in another district. So thank you for your time and service here in our district, and we wish you well as you move a little closer to home to another position. At the same time, I would just like to mention that we are now fully engaged in a process to find his replacement. We have been interviewing candidates, and we hope to have a final candidate to bring to the board at the March board meeting. So again, congratulations, Dr. Chapman. Thanks again. And we will be moving forward with finding a replacement with shoes that are really hard to fill. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pearson, for that update and communication. And then also, many thanks to you, Dr. Chapman, for your leadership and guidance, at least since I've been on the board and even prior to that. Truly appreciate your tutelage through these processes, and you will be missed.
If I may, Mrs. Fairgrieve, I think we're going to have many months of talking about what you've added to the district in the many years you've been here and helping put us in the great position we're in. So I don't want to say too much today, but we will have to continue to celebrate what you've done here for us. So this is not the end of our celebrations for you. There'll be more because the impact you've made on St. Charles has been a great one. And we thank you for that, as Mrs. Fairgrieve said. But we will have a much greater send-off at a business service meeting down the line, not to worry.
Well, thank you. I don't want to say too much either because there's 4.5 months left before that move. But thank you for Dr. Pearson and to the Board of Education. I've always felt appreciated and welcomed here, and can't thank everybody enough. This is a wonderful community and a very hard community to leave. And so, as Dr. Pearson said, getting closer to home is great for my family with young kids. So I'm looking forward to that, but I will very much miss being here. So thank you all.
Okay, so moving to our 4 discussion items. Item 3A is our Mid-Valley January financial update.
Okay, yes, Mid-Valley is reporting that both their revenue and their year-to-date expenditures are trending behind the prior year, and that there are no concerns at this time relating to the budget expectations.
Okay, moving to the next item 3B relates to the District 303 January financial update.
Okay, do that one as well. Please note that the revenue is trending ahead of the prior year. And if you remember, I prepared the board last month for the possibility that the state would begin to fall behind in payments. However, the district received the second categorical payment at the end of January. For comparison purposes, we did not receive the second categorical payment last year, which was vouchered in December 2019 until April of 2020. So that makes this payment about 90 days ahead of last year. Expenditures are trending very close to the prior year, and there are no other concerns within the revenue or expenditure budget at this time. Also, please note that in the packet is the investment report for January, which is included for your information.
I just wanted to add one thing. In our preparation for this meeting, Ms. Weil and Ms. Fairgrieve, I misspoke and said that this would be our third. The one that we received earlier in the year was accrued back to the prior year. So we are 2 categoricals received this year, as Ms. Mader indicated.
I think that is what you said in the meeting, just so you know.
Oh, okay. I thought I said we had 1 from last year and 2 from this year, but
oh, you did.
Yeah.
So, okay.
So this is 2 total.
Oh,
And-
this is two total.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
one from last year, one from this year.
No, both, everything is going according to fiscal year.
Okay,
Yeah,
so none from last year.
Correct,
Gotcha.
correct. We accrued that back into the prior year when the
Okay.
auditors came.
So is the total that we talked about, the 1.2 million, is that lower as well?
No, so the 1.2 million is what we receive per quarter. So it's a little over that 1.25 million. So 2.5 million is what we've received to date for this fiscal year.
Thank you for that clarification. Moving on to item 3C, which is a resolution authorizing transfer of monies from our working cash fund.
Yes, this is an annual process, and this has to do with the fact that our cash flow this time of year starts going down as we get taxes. 80% of our revenue comes in either June or September. So until we get to June, we'll have a declining balance. And so this allows us to manage those balances within funds. At the end of the year, the auditors will work with us and we'll move those funds back into the appropriate fund.
Does anyone have any questions on that item? Okay, so this will be at the board meeting for action. Next item is item 3D, 5-year financial forecast.
Yes, not a whole lot to update you on in terms of the COVID-19 impact. Really, under $20,000 came in, and we do have a couple of expenses that are going to hit next month for some technology licenses and things of that nature that will be a lot larger. But for this month, really not much of a change, as you can see in the report. So our net total to date is for both fiscal years is just over 1.7 million. And then for this fiscal year is just under 1.5 million. Any questions on that?
I just want to remind board members to please, if you have any questions about the COVID report, it is on your monthly meeting reports under FYI. So please don't hesitate to look those up.
Are you ready? Are you ready to move ahead?
I am. Yes.
Okay,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
So next is the item E is the year-end projections. In interest of time, I have abbreviated this. So on Friday, I posted a pre-recorded version that we will certainly post, of course, after this meeting for the public to see. I'm going to cut to the chase, so to speak, and you can ask me questions if I'm not going enough detail on the PowerPoint. So, advanced too quickly. So this is an overview of the dashboard, and all of these expenses are through January 31st of 2021, so very recent. That upper left-hand corner widget in yellow there is our year-to-date revenues. The top percentage reflects what we've actually received versus what was projected, what we should have received at this point based on history and some adjustments that were made prior to the beginning of the year through our team and the business office. And so we're just slightly below where we would have projected to be at this point in time, 1%. Of course, on a budget of $180 million, that's a pretty large dollar amount. On our year-to-date expenditures below that, you'll see a larger variance between our actual year-to-date, 49.5%, and projected year-to-date at 51.3%. Most of the expenditures are due to salaries. Those are mostly variable expenses, so we're not taking the number of field trips we have in the past. We're not paying as much overtime. Substitute costs are a little lower than they have been, things of that nature. So that's why we're seeing lower expenditures, among other reasons. On the revenue side, interest earnings, we refunded some fees at the beginning of the year, so there's some lower local revenue that's driving that. Interestingly, you'll see on the bar on the upper right chart in state is actually higher than what we've expected to receive at this date, and Ms. Mader talked about that earlier in terms of getting our second categorical early. So that will influence our projections year to date. So again, kind of cutting right to the chase here, what does that mean for us as a district? On the expenditure side, almost $5.5 million under budget. We had a very conservative budget. That went forward too, sorry. On the revenue side, shortfall of around $2.5 million. So we're just under $3 million projected through January 31. So that number can change. I caution us to be, too set on that number just because of the fact, one, we're in kind of an unusual year where history doesn't help us as much. And number two, we're still 5 months from a financial perspective at the end of the year. So we'll continue to monitor this, but that gives us a pretty good idea that we do have the availability to spend more funds if the board should desire to do that. I also wanted to point out on this last slide here that D303 among our peers was very unique from the perspective that, we started in-person learning really at the start of the school year, and ramped in at all of our levels, but we did start on time. And there are some districts in our area that did not, that haven't started until as late as the end of January. And so based on that will have a huge impact on the amount of reserves, both last year that were accumulated and this year that we are going to accumulate. So when you're seeing other districts talk about extremely large fund balances, their balances will likely be larger than what we will have based on that. I also want to point out that, as I mentioned earlier, conservative budgeting process. So what that means is we expected revenues to be down in a lot of areas. We expected issues with some of these COVID-related expenses. So we moved out funds for bus purchases that we normally would make. We reduced technology expenses as part of the budgeting process. And so when we get down to the recommendation area, that's what we're looking for now. So later on in your agenda, we have the next two items are recommendations to make purchases to bring back some of those expenses on our bus replacements, and for technology device purposes. So in terms of what's next for us, we'll continue to monitor these expenses. We do expect the application process for the second round of stimulus, the ESSER funds, to be available as early as this week. And that's roughly $1.75 million. We've looked to split that between this fiscal year and next fiscal year, about 50-50 on that. And then also just a reminder that when we put that contingency amount into the budget, we knew we'd have a budget amendment to do. Of course, there's been a lot of other things that have happened. So we will plan to bring you a budget amendment that will include items like are being recommended for the buses and technology as well, sometime likely in May for you to review, and then we'll repost and go through that whole budget process again. Any questions I can answer for you on the year-end projections?
I just want to say I appreciate you going through kind of the differences between our district and some of our neighbors, because I know that's certainly a point out in the media, and some of the things that we have saved costs on as to why that is the case, because I know that those are also questions out there. So do any of our board members have any more questions on that? Are we pretty clear?
No, I just appreciate it's always good to compare ourselves to the other districts to know, what's going on.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that update, Dr. Chapman. I think overall, it's a very good story for our district. And I think that we're, again, continue to be in a very solid financial position, which is important, especially during this time and environment. The next item we have is food service renewal plans, which would be 3F.
Am I looking at the wrong version? I had buses. Is it different? Oh, not sure what happened there. I'm sorry.
But that's fine. That's fine. I have it up online as well. So we can do 3F, purchase of buses for transportation department.
Okay. Mr. Baird's coming up. Good.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm bringing forward, over the course of the last several years, we've had the privilege of Dr. Chapman working with transportation and myself. He will be missed. But the ability to look at our fleet, we have 99 large buses presently, and we have 40 mid-sized buses, and we have a reimbursement program where we have up to 5 years to sort of offset some of those costs. We've been looking at moving forward. Our number that we had this year was $800,000 that we were looking at using. And what we'd like to go forward with is the purchase of the 6 passenger microbuses, along with the 2 wheelchair lift buses. And we'd like to add 3 large buses that was totaling $763,000. And that'll bring our fleet for special ed buses up to about that 10-year window that we were trying for. And then at our other large buses, what we do have is we were at 16 years, and we're actually just shy of between 12 and 13 for our fleet on the other sides. When we return our buses now, we are receiving trade-in allowances as opposed to scrap when we used to have the buses that were 16 and 17 years old, and we were virtually just running them into the ground. So that's what we'd like to move forward with.
Any questions for Mr. Baird? Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
That will go on consent.
Yes. Next item would be our item 3G device purchases for pre-K through 3rd grade.
Yep, Mr. Smith is here to speak to that. Thank you.
Good evening. Prior to the pandemic, we were working on a plan to implement and budget and implement one-to-one devices for pre-K through 3rd grade. Once we had the pandemic hit, those plans were put on hold due to financial uncertainty, and we had a need to assign students with devices that we had on hand. Most of these devices were basically going to be retired at the end of last school year, but we were able to keep them in place, and mostly they have served us well. But at this point, they're all over 4 years old. In many cases, we cannot update the operating system and the security settings to what's considered current, and it becomes problematic for many of the important applications that our youngest kids are using, like iReady and Zern and some of those other ones. So we'd like to present the possibility of ordering new devices for these students and adding them into our typical 3-year rotation. So we have 1,750 standard iPads for the pre-K through 1st grade students, and 1,700 typical Chromebooks that we use, which are the convertible Chromebooks or the world-facing camera for the 2nd and 3rd grade students.
Any questions on this item? Okay. One thing I think I'd like to highlight is both of these items do have the potential that we could put them through any additional CARES funds that we get down the road, especially as the CARES Act continues to go through the federal process. If depending on how that pans out, there's money that's set aside to be allocated to schools in particular, in addition to federal and state level. So there's an opportunity that we would be able to stack this against that. Thank you much.
I just want
go
to
ahead.
ask the board.
Sorry.
No, it's just a large investment. I know it's a benefit for student use and investment in the efficiency and effectiveness of student work, ease of use for early student learning, and investment to catch up with students who've been a remote or part-time learning. It's a large investment. Does the board have any interest? Do we want to put it to action, or are we comfortable putting it at consent?
I'm fine with it being in consent.
Okay.
What's the total amount on it?
It's going to be about
Well,
1.16. It's 1.1 million.
1,165,000.
Well, if you have interest in putting it up for action, you might as well pull it now rather than waiting until the meeting. But
I'm fine putting it on consent. I just know that in the past, we've put it up for
it's a
action
significant amount.
when it's a significant amount of funding, yeah.
So
I think partially too why we put it on for action was because it was the start of this process too, and that we were kind of showing that our goal as a board was to get to that 1-to-1. I mean, I'm fine with it on consent either way, but I think that's kind of why we started to do that for this particular item, just because we wanted to show the community how our goal was to get our students at 1-to-1. So.
Right, and now that this is kind of farther down the line, and this is the K through 3,
It's more of a renewal process now.
I just wanted to make sure the board had an opportunity to discuss.
we've had items of this amount that have. I just wasn't sure what your
No,
reasoning.
I'm
other
fine with
than-
it on consent, but I want to make sure that everyone's good with it before we move on. Because we have full board here tonight.
I'm hearing and seeing that we are.
Yeah, I think,
so.
okay,
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, so we'll keep that at consent. Next item 3H, the voicemail refresh purchase.
Our voicemail system is original to when we changed over to a voice over IP system, which I believe was in 2012. It is getting close to end of life, and we're looking to add some new features to integrate it with email and some other systems. I do believe the price is at, I don't have it right in the moment, $57,000. Originally, that was up around $90,000, but there's significant individual migrations that need to take place with this that originally the vendor was going to look to do, and they were able to help us, excuse me, learn to do the individual migration. So our staff is going to handle all of that and cuts the cost significantly.
Any questions on this item? Okay, so this would be consent. And then the next item is 3I, additional access points purchase.
About 3 years ago, we did a major overhaul of all wireless across the district according to a design. And with any implementation like that, we like to have spares. And with the bringing Haynes online and some other things over the years, we have need for some more spares at this point, especially for mass testing, which is hard to do during COVID. But right before that, we were starting to do large groups of students in field houses or places where we might not have the needed capacity for wireless. And so we would like to add 50 additional spare wireless access.
Any questions on this item? Okay, that'll be for consent. Dr. Chapman, I think we've gone through the forecasting model, so moving to food management service update. Okay. No, please do. Yep.
Thank you. Rookie mistake with the mic there, sorry. We look at the big levers and expenditures, and I'm not going to go through these. These really haven't changed much over the years. Salary is about $1 million for every 1%. We'll talk about health insurance. Class size, of course, is always interesting, and a reminder that that's an average by district, as the building size or the building by building sizes can vary in each building and classes. And then construction, this year was the first year we budgeted for that out of Fund 60. We worked with our auditors, and they preferred us to spend those capital expenses out of Fund 60. So that's a change that we'll be doing for the second year this year. Staff-related expenses, we are approaching our final year. So next year will be our final year for our contractual agreements. With our transportation and maintenance, 3.5%, and the education support staff is 3.75%. And a reminder, with those groups, we were in negotiations. There were considerations that were taken into effect with the minimum wage law. So we're still on that trend for $15 an hour in 2025. So those percentages reflect our intention to ramp up with that minimum wage law. Certified staff, you as a board in the last negotiations did a great job of tying increases to CPI. CPI came in at 1.4%, which means the total is 1.9%, although there is opportunity for staff through lane movements, and depending on which lane they're in, there's also a step increase. So it'll be somewhere around 2.3 to 2.5% is the typical increase for our SEA staff next year. Conservatively, we've assumed 3% for future years, and also conservatively, anybody who's not included above is assumed at a 3%. And typically those groups come in well under that, more like 2%. So just a heads up that that's a projection that probably will come down as we go into the budgeting process. Enrollments and teacher ratios are assumed to be the same. Of course, this year, those kind of went out the window, and everything in this model is with the assumption that we are back in person in August. So any variations to that plan or variations to costs that would increase, whether that be space or staffing, are not included in this projection. And we have to need to be revisited during the budget process. It's important to note that we do factor in teacher retirements. Mr. Morris told me that 9 is probably going to be a little low for 21. We'll probably have a couple more come through to the end this year, and then a total of 56 for future years are assumed as well. And so we get that cost savings from their retirement salary into MA lane step 5 is the assumption for new staff. Additional expenditure assumptions, we continue to trend really well on health insurance, as most districts do. Being in a pandemic, a lot of elective and there are certain costs that just can't be incurred. So I do think there will be a correction period at some point, but we're not there yet. We're likely going to see a lower than 6% increase for next fiscal year, more like in the 3 to 4%. But we're assuming this conservative now, and 8% is typical medical trend. So again, an area that probably can be reduced as we get into the budget process. Technology spending we talked about earlier. In order to ramp up on the memo that was included with Mr. Smith's item, kind of noted some of those items that aren't being purchased ahead. So that means we'll have to ramp up next year's purchasing and then drop that down by $500,000 the following year and forward. So the cost of technology will increase over time, but next year will be the most expensive year that we're budgeting for. Contingency, as I mentioned, we had $1 million in this year's budget. We're recommending reducing it to $500,000. We're assuming a smaller amount, $100,000 for COVID-19. And then for years, we've assumed some kind of a TRS pension cost shift just to hedge against the potential the state might make that change mid-year or after the budget's approved. So we have that added that back in this assumption at 0.5% of $400,000. And then everything else is not to increase by more than future year CPIs, which is based on the 10-year average of 1.8%. And again, just to note that this is the least reliable year we've ever had to try to project. So we're doing our best with what we have, but just know that as we go through this process, we know that we'll make adjustments. Here's a look at our certified staff. We're at just under 1,020 total, not counting administration. That number is projected based on our enrollment projections, which get updated every year, to drop over the next few years and then come back, but not quite to today's standards by the time we get to 2026. Our debt schedule, this gives you the history and the future of it. That note off to the right is important. Your decision as a board to pay off early the 2011 debt certificates not only saved interest of around $70,000 for the district overall, but freed up around $280,000 of cash flow in next year's budget and the next 2 years after before they would be paid up. So that move certainly will pay dividends in the future for the district. And then again, we have an opportunity as a district here to see another drop, about 50% in our debt schedule coming up that will be factored into next year's tax levy. So big levers on the revenue side. Again, I'm not going to go into detail on these. These haven't changed really much in the past either. The key area to focus in on is the EBF, the evidence-based funding. The tiers don't get announced until May or June usually, so we're still at the same place we have been through the last budgeting process and the last levy process. So we're at 101.9%. There's a good chance that'll come down slightly, but I don't think that will put us into tier 3 based on what I've seen. EBF represents about 2/3 of our total state funding. So this year we've budgeted for $9.6 million. And the governor reported that basically flat funding. Despite this, these projections show a reduction down to $9 million, again, being conservative, because just because the governor said that doesn't mean that's necessarily what's going to get approved or appropriated. So we are putting a slight reduction in on that. The last bullet on here is just a hypothetical. It has nothing to do with the bullet above that. Just so you get a sense of what could happen when there's reductions, it does not get spread evenly amongst the tiers. The way the model works is it's on a per student basis, and tiers 3 and tier 4, we're in tier 4, get impacted the most. And so a 5% reduction in appropriations at the state level means $180 per pupil, or a loss of $2.25 million for the district. So you can see a very significant cut for the district on a very small appropriation reduction. But there's really not any reason at this point to think that that would happen. That's just more for your information. On the local level, interest income is gone all but by the wayside. You know, under 10 basis points is about all we can seem to get on any short-term investments. So even though we dropped our investment income for this year, we are continuing to drop that. We had some laddered investments that put us in a better position as we started this year, but those have all come to fruition, and we're back getting lower interest rates. On the federal level, we do have an increase of around $850,000. I mentioned earlier, we're splitting the ESSER funds 50-50, half of that to come out of this year to help absorb some costs, and then the other half to come out of next year. And then the state funding I already mentioned, but that just gives you a scale on the categorical payments. We talked about that earlier. We're assuming the same 2 categorical payments. Interesting, I was looking through the State Board of Education's budget, and you know, they're calling for an increased proration percentage, but it's minimal, and I don't know that that's realistic either, because things like transportation claims were lower than they've been in the past, because anybody who had contracted services didn't have those expenses to apply. So I think those proration numbers are probably going to be the same or even drop. And then looking at some of the potential impacts, you know, we talked about evidence-based model and categoricals, but the other 2 things that really have not been talked about in quite some time, but could come back as we go through the budget process, are the pension cost shift and property tax free. So just to let you know that we'll keep our eye on that. If anything comes up, we'll certainly bring that to your attention, but you'll probably hear about it at the same time we do. Here's our chart and our graph that you probably have been very accustomed to. And we talk about the red being the high point balance, the purple being the low. And again, this is a June 30th perspective, where we're generally very high in our fund balances. But during the year, we do drop, and we need to have cash flow. That purple line's important, so we don't issue tax anticipation warrants. The green lines are the fund balance range that you as a board revisited earlier this year of 28 to 34%. And so that gives you an idea of kind of where, from a targeted perspective, you want to be, keeping in mind that once you get into that range, you're immediately going to have concerns about getting back up, because costs will go up the next year. So when we look at all funds, so this includes everything that we budget for, not just the operating expenses. You as a board are going to hear our facility master plan in April. And we've talked about before that presents an opportunity for you to do some spending to bring that fund balance down if you so desire. So that leads me to the last slide here, which just talks about the only other additional one-time expenses other than facility master plan is something you took advantage of 3 years ago, which is our unfunded liability. You paid about $3 million down on that, which saved the district about $210,000 per year starting last year. That certainly is an option for you. And then lastly, because I'm sure as we look at 5-year projections, our community wants to understand the impact on property taxes. And just a reminder that next year with that debt reduction would lead to $100 or more, and likely more, of a decrease for a $300,000 homeowner based on the reduction of that debt portion of the tax bill. So with that, I think that's it. Timelines. So this is the similar. You saw the schedule last month. We'll come back to you with the first draft in May. We as administration will work on putting the budget together and distributing it to the cost centers and getting something that is more in line rather than just a projection that you're seeing today. And then we'll come back in July for final draft review, and then you as a board would approve that at the September Board of Education meeting. Any questions I can answer for you on the 5-year projection model? I know there's a lot of reports in your packet. I didn't specifically say the dollar amount, but this projection yields about an $80,000 operating fund surplus, and then a deficit of a couple $1 million overall in all funds, but that's to be expected when you're making capital project improvements. So again, on trend for a perfect 4.0 financial rating.
Any questions for Dr. Chapman? Okay.
Just ask, when are we, and this might be for future meetings, when are we revisiting the discussion regarding of the levy discussion? Are we revisiting that?
We already did.
Oh, we did that.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. That was when I was in my personal situation. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's usually kind of a late fall thing, isn't it?
No,
Well,
no,
it was in
we did it
January.
You're talking about the
January.
abatement, the
Yeah.
potential abatement. Yeah.
Yes.
And what the abatement.
Yeah, that was at the
decision
January meeting, and we went through some scenarios, and it was decided to hold off because
To
that
hold off, right?
that abatement would
That's what the
eat
final
into that
decision
$100
was.
plus
Yes.
savings for the
Okay.
following year. So.
Right. Okay.
You're welcome.
I think we're at food management service update.
We are now. All right. So really good news, and huge thanks to our partners, both at the K and high school level with Organic Life and Quest. We continue to see participation numbers up, and a big thanks to Wendy Sedgwick and Patty Townsend for their work on this, and Mr. Baird and his team. Just really good numbers. So I embedded, instead of going through a long PowerPoint, because to be interested in time, I just wanted you to see kind of the scale of our food service. We're right around 40,000 meals a week. And Mrs. Fairgrave asked a really good question about, well, what is that like pre-pandemic? We were serving around 14,000 meals in a pre-pandemic environment. Now, keep in mind, that was 5 days a week. We're delivering 7 days a week now. We're delivering meals to anyone who wants one now. Back then it was, free was free, reduced was reduced, and paid was paid. So there are differences in those numbers, but to be at 40,000 meals, I think is a really great sign and a great indication, which of course flows through into the financial side. And after we started the year and we're concerned about potential six-figure deficits by the time we ended the year, we are now kind of bringing that back into the black. And as you see in the memo, about a $50,000 surplus in January has us trending towards finishing the year at an even or potentially even a surplus based on the larger reimbursement rates. So really a positive all the way around, with a big thank you to, of course, the USDA with their reimbursement levels. But really happy to report that. And so we're going to look, unless you have objections, we're going to look for renewals with both Organic Life and with Quest, and plan to bring those to you most likely at the April meeting. We'll have renewal information for you. Any questions?
Just to ponder that we are serving that many meals is great, but it also is, oh dear, we have families who are in need. Is that something we should reflect upon for the future as to were we meeting? Is there something more we need to do, or are we meeting all students' needs after the pandemic? What should we be thinking about?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, certainly I'm not necessarily the best person to ask that to, but what I would say is, I think in a landscape of food service, what you can expect the next time you go to bid is you're going to see higher costs. And I think, to get to your question, I think this board and all school boards probably need to ask themselves, are you okay running a deficit if it means that we're able to serve our kids and our community better? Because it's going to be increasingly more challenging to be in the black in food service. But I don't think the need's going to go away. I think it's getting stronger, to your point. So it will become a philosophical conversation of what does the food service program mean to D303? Is it a cost center in which we're required to do it and we want to break even, or is it more than that? And I think you as a board made strides in that area at the high school level, pulling that off the program, that were non-monetary reasons. And so does that conversation continue?
I think, Mrs. McCabe, to your point, something we might want to think about as a district is how do we I guess, publicize or market more the free and reduced application process. So I think while some families are utilizing that process, I think we might have more families that qualify for the reduction portion that are probably not aware of it. Because that continuum for reduction qualification can be quite encompassing. So I think there may be families that qualify for it that they may not be aware. So I think that is something that we can look at for the fall, or talk about over the summer, or the district can, on how do we include more families in that information so they can understand that process better.
I think that's a real, just to jump on it, I think that's a very good point. I think that I don't know that the fact that we are providing 40,000 meals is the right measurement, if you will. And the reason I say that is specifically at the high schools, the meal packages are given to every student, regardless of what their need is. So that might be a way to approach it and to really try to get a better understanding of where the need is and how we can support that.
That was something I was going to make mention of, as well as, I know there are people that are getting meals that don't need them, that right now. And I say that because my sons have come home and I said, you don't need these, so make sure those go to people who need them. So I think that those numbers are maybe temporarily inflated. And the other thing really is I want to make sure that we're cautious too, to not try to turn ourselves into an all-purpose social service agency. If there are families in need, I want them to get the help they need, but we're not necessarily going to always be equipped for that. And so maybe we need to direct them to the proper agency if the need is that great.
The one thing that's been really, I guess, a silver lining of the food program that the government's provided. Tell me the name of the program again.
Oh, SFSP, Summer Food Service Program.
Yeah, that. Is that it's destigmatized the concept of taking home a lunch, or how do I get a free lunch, in the sense of, like, anything's destigmatized, that it's not the thing you talk about quietly in the corner anymore. It's okay to say, yeah, we get lunches. So I think in that vein, I think it's okay to talk about families, to your point that, hey, let's publicize that if you need a free and reduced lunch, make that part of the website, where I don't know that we've actually really done a push on that before, in the sense of who's qualified, who's not, how do you get qualified? And that way they can get their resources through that application process, but we're still giving them the help that they need. The other thing is a lot of districts provide public information as to food bank pickups. So I know Elgin is really good at it. Even Wheaton does it, to your hometown. Lots of them talk about, hey, there's, I can't think what they're called now, food bank pickups, where they're at ECC this weekend, or they're in Aurora this weekend, and they send out, a email blast to their their parent population, and let them know. So those people that do need food, have food inequities, and do need assistance, can go and help themselves to that weekend. So, there's things that we can do that don't make us necessarily a social service organization, but can make us an informational assistance group as well to our families that are in need.
So again, that's kind of my point, is that I don't want to necessarily guess, again, based on the numbers that we had during this particular time, because I think there were inflated numbers. And as I say, they were kind of just handing them to whomever as they walked out the door, and my sons weren't even sure why they were getting them. They were just somebody was sticking them in their hand. And I said, just make sure those are going, I want to make sure those are going to people who need them. I don't want my sons getting those. I want those to go to the people who need them. And I'm all for letting people know the right place to go. But we will become, if we try to do too many things, we're going to become bad at all of them.
Yeah, I would say totally different point. So, Ms. Ringna, I hear you there. Totally different point. back to Ms. Weibel, your comment about do people who are eligible know? That's for quite some time been a goal of ours in the food service program is to make sure that we're hitting a good percentage of the eligible free and reduced students. And while I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, and I know there's room for improvement, we've made some strides in that. I mean, I'd like to see us in the 80 to 90% that are eligible are taking it. And at one point it was more like 50. That's too low. I know in the past we've had some trouble with language barrier issues, and we've tried to work with Organic Life on that point. You know, I think your point about the stigma, hopefully, what are the practices we're doing now that can help to continue this process where we don't lose ground and it becomes, oh, we went back to the old way and we missed an opportunity. So those are things that I think need to be looked at as well. But there's certainly area there. The problem we have, I think, and I agree with Mr. McNally, the number's probably not that large, but we've always believed that there is food insecurity above and beyond the poverty levels in the free and reduced application process. So that's a challenge, and how do we help meet that, and how do districts face that? Some of these districts that have a larger district, a low income percentage, will qualify for additional reimbursement, and then therefore they offer a summer seamless process. So before the SFSP, it's a summer seamless, and they've been doing that process already. District 03 could do that, but wouldn't have the criteria to meet the funding at that same level, and so it would be more costly program. But that's certainly something the board could consider in the future.
I just want to go back and recorrect one thing. We do send out some information about the Northern Illinois Food Bank and kind of what's available. So we are doing that. So I want to make sure people know that D303 is sending that on social media and in our e-newsletter. So thank you, Mrs. Smith, for doing that.
Okay, so just to close out, so our food service is funded through the federal program through June 30th. And then, you know, we'll revisit as things change. The next item would be a review of bids for contract. Mr. Baird.
You get Mr. Baird for several items. You're lucky.
The rest of the alphabet. But good evening again. The first item up is going to be the partnership that we have with the St. Charles Park District. A year ago, when we went right into COVID, we were going to be doing the playground at Bell Graham. We actually didn't meet that complete window by the end when they could install it because of all the things that were put in place that we couldn't have that installed. So the park, we made you aware, we rejected the final bid, and then we went out to bid again. So they just did that recently. They do have a qualified bidder that came forward. It is the same individual that we had last year, and they're actually less this year than what they bid last year. But we would like to move forward with the Park District and award that to D&J Landscape and go ahead and move forward.
And I believe this will be completed, we're looking at in the June timeframe.
June, they're set for the first day after school.
Yep, after school is closed. Any questions?
Yes.
Okay, so this, can this be on consent? Yeah, okay. Okay, next item, 3M, award of contract capital improvements related to Haynes.
Okay, so the next three that we have come up are actually on our 5-year capital coming up, and I'll give you a total at the end so we can say what our projection was minus what the actuals came in at. The first is sort of to complete off Haynes. We did not do the asphalt behind the gymnasium on the side of Oak Street or in front of where the library is presently using the facility. We'll be replacing some curbs at pretty much all the curbing up the front and on the side of Oak Street. And then in the back, of course, replacing all three of those parking lots. And so the bid, the projected bid that was going to come in was $740,200. I was very excited that we had 11 bidders come to the bid opening and come through, and the award will go to Advantage Paving at a price of $334,900, difference of $405,000 for the good, $405,300. and we would like to move forward with that and start the construction.
Questions? Okay, that would be consent. Next item.
Thank you very much. The next item that we have is the award of the school alarm fire alarm system at 3 of our sites, Munhall, Wasco, and Wild Rose. 2 of those sites are actually in 2 of those sites are actually in a different municipality or fire district. So we're working with those fire departments very closely. And as of right now, the net budget impact, the capital projection was $367,900, and the bids came in at $326,824. I did want to say that there was a total of 4 bids that were submitted for the project, but 1 bid was incomplete and did not acknowledge the addendum, which would require, you saw how it required per code that they remove the old fire alarm system, and they did not put that in. That's why they were. So we would like to award it to iWire Technologies, LLC, for $326,824.
I just have one follow-up question.
Sure.
Is the security film is not included in this, right?
No. This is the fire alarm replacement.
Right.
The security film is next.
Okay.
Okay. This was strictly the fire alarm replacement for the addressable systems that we've been putting in over the course of the last years, that you can actually speak at the monitor. And when they walk in the front lobby, there's actually a statement. And then, of course, in the boiler room, we have the other one. So they know exactly where the fire is in relation to buildings.
Any questions on that one? We kind of moved into the next one, 3-0.
Oh, no, not a problem. So the next one is going to be the bid awarding the film for Thompson and Redling Middle School. At the time that we originally were putting this bid together, we did not include Haynes with the transition program and, of course, the Compass program that we're doing next year. So we decided to put an alternate in because the bidding has been very good as of recent. So on the net budget impact, we had a 5-year capital projection of $155,400. And the net budget impact with the addition of Haynes, the entire lower level of Haynes, is only an increase of $2,759. So while this came above the actual capital projection, it does also include all the alternates accordingly. So this is sort of, even though it was a little bit above, it's exciting, and we get to do all the first levels. At this point, we will have all the first levels done at both high schools and the middle schools and the transition in Compass.
Okay, thank you. That will be on consent as well. Next item is the Thompson LRC carpet replacement.
A year ago, when we finished the Haynes LRC, actually when we were completing that, we were moving the library in the transition, and in the front offices of the old counseling offices directly that the library is in right now, we did not paint, we did not touch up, we did not do anything to that existing carpet, as we also did not do anything to the transition offices with the old green carpet that was the existing carpet. So we went out for a quote on this, and we had $50,000 in the account to go out, and Touch of Beauty actually won this quote with $32,462.22. And we would like to move forward with them, please.
Okay, so that would be on consent.
Okay.
And then, I'm sorry, the next one is actually the Thompson LRC carpet.
The carpet below your feet. Okay. This wonderful carpet has been here for 22 years, and we would like to move forward. We did go meet with Redling, and we met with their leadership team and went through, and actually it was part of the facility master plan to just identify these things. And what we are proposing is to replace the carpet that it is in this room. Once again, we had allocated $50,000 for this, and it came in with Touch of Beauty for $35,528.52. And that will be done in June.
Just one kind of on the side comment. So the LRCs, they are being considered as part of the facility master plan review, correct?
Yes, Mr. President.
Okay. All right.
And they're actually talking to both their leadership teams about furnishings and paint and different things like that. This was something that, while it made their list, has always been on our list for the last 2 years. And then we did look at the carpet at Redling. It was replaced 6.5 years ago. So that was completed.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to continue to highlight what we had talked about, because I know you and I in particular had looked at LRCs at Redling and Thompson Middle School in regards to furniture and what have you. And so parents in particular that were concerned about that, I think we want to just make sure that community members that had that concern talk to their facility leadership, so their principals, and make sure that they're involved in the process for facility utilization plan. So as that process continues and we get the recommendations from the planning members and the leadership at each building, that if they want input on that, to make sure that they contact their building leadership for the furniture concerns and things like that. So.
And thank you for clarifying that for me too, because last year we did have several parents that stepped forward and had concerns about the furniture, and Mr. Leversky said he would be happy to bring them into the fold to have a conversation about what that looks like. And so Mr. Leversky is very excited about that.
We just want to make sure that our constituents are being heard, our parents are being heard, as we're, putting forth dollars towards carpet, that we're hearing them about furniture and things that the students are utilizing as well with their, in their seats versus on their feet. So, all right, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is 3R, furniture purchase for Compass.
For the Compass Academy, we did have some money allocated to the side about as far as we put $90,000 out. We did go to different agencies on this quote. Similarly to what happened at Thompson and Redling in the past, Lowry McDonald had some things that were identified from the Compass Academy team. Dr. Herman and her team outlined exactly what they wanted in the facility. And so we would like to award Lowry McDonald Company the $62,017.10, which takes care of the specific learning spaces and the common area furniture. And then Frank Cooney Company, the $25,521 for the furniture types that they wanted. And that once again was within what we assigned. And there were some additional dollars that were from the Haynes Trust and things like that. And Dr. Chapman may be able to share a little bit of some of those other dollars.
Yeah, so we have that reserve account that we talked about before that can pick up, I believe the number was $140,000 of these expenses. We'll cover that.
That's coming straight from the Charles H. Haynes Trust, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah, so that has to be used specifically for that building.
That's what you as a board decided, yes.
Right,
Yes,
sorry.
correct.
Yes, correct.
Okay, any questions on that item? Okay, that'll be consent. Next item is 3S.
And that's the purchase of a Ford E350 cube truck. We do all the deliveries between all the schools daily. We sort of split the district up in two areas, and we have one that is sort of seen its life, and it's just time to move on. We did find a used vehicle that met all of our mechanics requirements and everything that we needed with the liftgate, and that would be to purchase a used 2019 Ford cube truck at a cost of $35,445.
Okay, very good. Any questions? Okay, that moves to consent. Next item 3T relates to John Deere Gator utility vehicle.
We have been contacted by the East High School Athletic Department, and we'd like to buy a Gator, a John Deere Gator. We told them we would assist and put it out to bid. They have the money within their East High School budget, and at the cost is $15,244.31.
And I was just giggling in the corner because, it's business service can be sometimes very exciting. And just to remind, the board and the public, this is one that actually didn't have to come to the board because it's under our $25,000 threshold. But in full transparency, and we just want to make sure that when East is spending, this amount of money on something that's a transportation piece, that, it's coming to the board and we're aware of it, and Mr. Beard is presenting on it. So.
And the other piece to it is that it's sort of good for you to know that we have a preventative maintenance process for anything that we would purchase that was mechanical or had an engine in it, that our team it's all in, they're part of the process, and then it becomes part of their process. So
Next item 3U, architectural services RFQ.
well, I'm excited to bring this forward. So I put it in front of you is a timeline. Dr. Pearson and I and Dr. Chapman have had many conversations just as we move forward. I would really love to go forward with an architectural services RFQ, similarly to what we did back when we did the facility master plan to bring people in to do the interview. This was the process that we would like and the timeline that we would like to follow. And we would just recommend that we have the opportunity to finish developing the RFQ and move forward. I did put a draft in there if you had any changes or anything that you would like to do. I would love to do that.
I was going to ask you, can you explain again, or maybe Dr. Chapman can, the process? We put the RFQ out and then there's a meeting, right? Or how does that work?
Actually, sort of outlined below, you have the RFQ responses. We put the RFQ out on the street, then we have the responses that are due by March 19th, followed by we interview the top firms, we create a rubric, and then we have a final recommendation that we would bring forward to business services. We create the rubric with the team, similar like when you all participated, some of you participated in the facility master plan.
That's what I was looking for, was the board meet. So on the 7th, is that what it?
April 7th would interview the firms.
Okay.
April 26th would be the recommendation to business services, and it would go to the Board of Education meeting on May 10th. And then that could dovetail in, if ATS&R were to apply and not get that, that would give us time to have overlap and then move forward between the facility master plan and the 5-year capital plan moving forward. It would be a nice transition, if so.
Any other questions on that item? And just for awareness purposes too, so Mr. Baird, he has been in contact with the Regional Office of Education, the ROE. So all of the administrative logistical pieces have been taken care of as we go forward. Okay.
I would just like to say that I think, I think it's a good move for us to look and expand and see what other firms are out there that can be of assistance for us. And I'm looking forward to the process.
Thank you very much.
Next item, the facility master plan update, item 3B.
Some of it was put in the board book. I did, Dan Critta is here in case there were any specific questions, but they're continuing to translate the needs statements from what I understand into solutions and rely on the ed facility, of course, the planning committee to voice their beliefs and come up with options from the last meeting. There's another meeting scheduled for next week.
Mrs. Barker and I have been taking turns sitting in on those meetings and are very impressed with the quality and depth of thinking that are going on. We want to be sure that in these meetings that all voices are heard and that we are looking about all kids. So we, both Mrs. Barker and I, are considering putting together a statement to have the CAC and the facilities folks understand that this is, we really trust this group of folks, that it's a very diverse community group, and we want to be sure that all voices are heard and that there is no preconceived plan that the board or the administration has in terms of what they will land on, and we want them to have the freedom to have that kind of conversation. So we'll be back in touch with you if we do put a statement together so that you can report out to it.
Thank you very much. Any other questions related to facility master plan? Okay, thank you, Mr.
Thank you very
Baird.
much.
Do we have any citizen? Okay, there are no citizen comments. Yeah, in terms of, there is an attachment in your packet related to future agenda items coming up in March. A couple items I would highlight: the Thompson Turf Intergovernmental Agreement will be a key item on there. And so with that, we will conclude at 6:06 p.m. on Monday, February 24th. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the special meeting for the school board on Monday, February 22nd. It is 6:25. Call the meeting to order. Ms. Martin, will you call roll, please?
Mrs. Barker,
Here.
Mrs. Fairgrieve,
Here.
Mrs. McCabe,
Here.
Mr. McNally,
Here.
Ms. Weibel,
Here.
Mr. Mannheim.
Here. Will you please rise for the pledge? All right. Are there any citizens' comments? No? Okay. Just want to make sure. All right. So that brings us to why we are here tonight, and that is to have in-person interviews for the 7 candidates. Before we do get started, Mr. Mazzara reached out to me, and he is under the weather. So he asked if he could Zoom in. So he'll be joining us online. And then when it's his turn, we'll interview him through Zoom. A little bit about the process. I know I kind of reached out to all of you. Thanks for coming tonight. Welcome. We're excited to get to know you guys. Our goal is to have about 3 minutes per question. There are going to be 7 questions total. And our goal is to have about 3 minutes. Ms. Marsan is going to keep a timer. If you hear it go off, just kind of maybe try to wrap up your thoughts. We're not going to cut you off right at the 3 minutes, but if you kind of hear the timer go off, maybe kind of just wrap up your thoughts, and then we can kind of move to the next questions and such. As I kind of mentioned to you, we are going to randomize the order. So Mrs. Barker has a lovely basket here with names in it. And so we'll just take it how that goes if you're called, and then you can come up and introduce yourself. I think I kind of mentioned some of the other things to you guys when I called. After we adjourn to closed session, then the board will discuss the candidates and hopefully come to a conclusion this evening. And then I will reach out to all of you tomorrow to kind of let you know what we decided. Whoever is selected then would be seated at our March 8th board meeting. Okay. So before we get started, I just thought just kind of go around and introduce ourselves. I think most of you know who we are, but just, in case you can't read our names or whatever. So I'm Nick Mannheim, and I don't know which way you want to go.
I'm Carolyn Weibel.
Heidi Fairgrieve. Becky McCabe.
Jillian Barker.
Ed McNally.
Okay, then I think our goal was to start at 6:30, so we are on schedule for that. So with that being said, Mrs. Barker, will you call our first name?
Jesse Mazzara.
Oh, all right. So Mr. Smith will tap us in, I believe, here.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Thank you. Did you hear everything from before?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So we'll go in order. I did mention it'll be the same 7 questions for each candidate, and it'll be the same order. So I'll start off with a question, and then we'll kind of go around the room. Each board member will ask another question, and then I will end with the 7th question. So, all right. So with that being said, please briefly introduce yourself and explain what skills and experiences you will bring to the D303 school board that you believe will add value to our vision and work.
Yeah, well, thank you, everybody. And thank you again for the flexibility of zooming in here, as I am a little bit under the weather. My name is Jesse Mazzara. I've lived in St. Charles since 2016 and was really just drawn to the area from the strong community, and just it's a great place to live with a strong education system. My background is in corporate mobility and relocation. So really simplified, what that means is helping Fortune 500 companies move their C-suite and high talent employees around the globe. So something that I've cultivated in that profession is something that I think will really benefit the board is skill at empathetic listening, really putting myself in someone else's shoes to understand their concerns. And once I've taken, the stakeholder concerns and understood their needs, synthesizing that into an actionable plan that can be executed with, good customer service and, the stakeholders all being as happy as possible.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Parker?
Next question. The desires of the community, taxpayers, and the interests of school children are not always congruent. How will you balance the wants of stakeholders and the needs of our students?
Yeah, so, I really think that the district is doing a great job of doing that as it is. So I'd look to really, I think, continue the great work that's being done. Being fiscally responsible, I think, is key, not only in ensuring that, the community is an affordable and good place to live here in the short term, but also positioning for the long term by making wise decisions. And really, I think that's something, again, going back to that empathetic listening and understanding what the needs of the community are, talking with the community, open communication with those in the community, as well as those within the district, the teachers, the administration, and everyone involved, to make sure that the needs are being met, while also having that eye on the future, both fiscally as well as just to ensure that the standard of education, and I think, one of the allures of the area is the strength of the education. So keeping that strong and diverse.
Thank you. Ms. Weibel?
What sources do you consult when seeking information about D303 schools or the district? How do you clarify and confirm the accuracy of the information you receive? How would you prevent personal interest conflicts from influencing board decisions and policy?
Yeah. So really, the first place I do look is just on the district website. I want to go by what's the official stance of the district, and so that's the first place I'll look for that information as it's available. Would also obviously look to compare against the other surrounding communities and their districts, in discussions with members of those communities, as well as looking for information that those other boards publish. And then also just really making sure that I'm involving as many stakeholders and members of the community as possible to understand as fully as I can the issues at hand, and just the varying opinions on those. Really, I think the position of the board is to represent the community in as equitable of a way as possible. So just bringing in as many stakeholders as possible within the administration, with the educators themselves, with the families, the students, just to hear their voice and to understand, how they view the issue, to make sure that, as a member of the board and working in consensus with the board, we come to the best decision.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McNally?
What do you think are the curricular and instructional strengths of the district, and which areas do you believe need improvement?
So I think probably the biggest strength is just the teachers and support staff that we have. As you're aware, my wife is a teacher in the district, so I really get to see firsthand and hear from the story she tells how much the teachers, the support staff, down to the janitors and just everyone involved really is engaged and cares about the community. So I think that's really the biggest strength, and that's from that flows, all of the other success in education. I think really one of the other great things about the district, and something that really drew me to this opportunity as well, is just the diversity of learning options and the support that's provided to the students in the district. I've seen firsthand from my own public education the difference that resources and a good curriculum can make. it can be really make or break for those involved in the process. So just really, I guess even just proud of the work that's done in that and just the opportunities that are available. With regards to, areas of opportunity, I think you'd get a different answer to that if you talk to anybody on the street. But I think right now, just with the world we're in, I think that the focus would need to be on continuing to develop the curriculum and instructional techniques for remote learning. For the foreseeable future, it looks like that's going to have to continue. So just really focusing in on that. And I also believe it offers a really interesting opportunity to continue that moving forward, as we're even seeing, in the workplace now, more and more people are going to working remotely, both within their neighborhood and around the world. So preparing our students for their future careers by continuing that, I think would be a interesting opportunity for the district.
Thank you. Mrs. McCabe.
What does equity in education mean to you? What experiences have you had in addressing inequity concerns? Or tell us about an instance when you have demonstrated awareness of equity as an essential value.
So I think for me, equity in education is really the framework in which, all of the social justice that is being spoken about nowadays can be worked out. It helps to ensure that someone's background doesn't impede their success. And I think that's really something that's great that the district is focusing on equity and making sure that every student has the best opportunities possible. For myself, I really think that's something that I see worked out every day. I work with a very diverse group of people in my workplace, both within my team of 12 that report into me. Half of them are non-US born. And then obviously moving people across the world every day. I've really just learned to understand more about how to communicate with people from different backgrounds, and to understand that sometimes people may need a little bit more help in certain areas because they either don't understand what you're communicating, or they need you to just communicate it in a different way that fits their context better. So I get to see that every day, and definitely think that's something that the district does well in just trying to be equitable in the education, and would like to see that continue.
Thank you. Mrs. Fairgrieve.
School closures, building repurposing, boundary changes have been a hot topic issue in D303 over the last decade. Do you believe that more closures, repurposing, or boundary changes are necessary? Why or why not? And what types of changes do you believe are important to consider, and why?
Yeah, like you said, it's definitely been a hot button issue here. I think right now, I don't believe that would be necessary. Obviously, I think that's something as we go into the future, we're going to have to keep a close eye on. I mean, I know in the neighborhood I live in, we see new apartment buildings coming up every day. So that's probably going to mean more students. And so just keeping a close eye on the demographics and needs will really, I think, drive what's done in the future with the redistricting or repurposing of the resources. And I really think, just being conscientious of the facilities that we have would be key. If at all possible, it'd be great not to have to expand if we could repurpose or reboundary so that we could use the existing resources to be fiscally responsible.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the last question is then, what responsibilities do board members have regarding the evaluation of the superintendent?
I really think the role of the board is to help keep the superintendent accountable as representatives of the community. So, accountability would be partnership, but it would also be, good questions and just making sure that every decision that's made is thought out carefully and enacted to the best of their ability. So yeah, just really keeping them accountable and representing the community.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the questions that we have for you tonight. I'd like to thank you again for being able to Zoom in with us and answer our questions.
Appreciate the flexibility. Thank you all.
Yep, thank you. All right. The next candidate.
Jennifer Shu.
Good evening. Thank you for being here with us tonight. All right. So the first question is, please briefly introduce yourself and explain what skills and experiences you will bring to the D303 school board that you believe will add value to our vision and work.
So can you hear me? My name is Jennifer Shu, and my family and I moved to District 303 in 2019 when our twins, they started kindergarten. We moved here from Tennessee, so we moved 1,000 miles, roughly, primarily for District 303 and the education that you have here. The skills and experience that I bring, I'm a pharmacist, but since our twins were born in 2014, I became a stay-at-home mother, and as a pharmacist, I needed to analyze data. I was a medication safety pharmacist as well as a professor of pharmacy. I taught at Campbell University and Duke University. The skills I bring, I have a background of interpreting data, looking at data, seeing whether or not the costs of the benefits versus the risks and the cost analysis, doing cost analysis, the medications. And so I think that an analytical skill set would be beneficial for the board, and as well as interpreting literature or information.
Thank you. Mrs. Barker.
The desires of the community taxpayers and the interests of school children are not always congruent. How will you balance the wants of stakeholders and the needs of our students?
As with medications, it's about benefits versus risks. You always weigh the benefits versus risks. And that goes with like adverse events versus if you're looking at cost. And so I think it's all, when you're looking at taxpayers in the interest of the school children and balancing it with the stakeholders, you want to look at the benefits versus risks and look at which outweigh the other. And in doing so, listening. I think the most important thing is listening and gathering information to see which one is the best option.
Okay. Mrs. Whitney.
What sources do you consult when seeking information about D303 schools or the district? How do you clarify and confirm the accuracy of the information you receive? How would you prevent personal interest conflicts from influencing board decisions and policy?
As with any information, I think it's most important to go directly to the source. So going to the District 303 website to see information firsthand. If necessary, going to .gov a reliable source of information. Just making sure that your source is reliable. Confirming the accuracy, again, the District 303 website, .gov, or a .gov address is reliable, or it should be. And preventing the personal interest with conflicts from influencing board decisions and policy. With anything, we need to be quick to listen and slow to speak. And the most important thing is listening and gathering data and information, and assessing your own bias and your own intentions. So you need to be careful that your own intentions and bias are not getting in the way. But again, listening and gathering information.
Thank you. Mr. McNally.
What do you think are the curricular and instructional strengths of the district, and which areas do you believe need improvement?
So we moved here in 2019 primarily for the culture of academic excellence here. My understanding is there's a selection of AP classes, and we also learned that the high school offered, or maybe it was even the middle school, offered an exchange with the orchestra to go to Europe, which I was really, really impressed with. And so I think that having opportunities like that, I've also met a family in our neighborhood who they were hosting an exchange student. And from my background, I was an exchange student, so that excited me, having those kinds of opportunities. And as regards, so the opportunities that the district offers, both from the class selection as well as the opportunities to have cultural exchanges. Need for improvement. We're newer to the district, so I don't have any preconceived ideas, and I would hope that I don't have any bias. But I would need more information because as regarding the need and improvement. So I would take that information and gather information from what people, but us personally, so far, they're in first grade, we're satisfied. Like I don't have any recommendations for improvement, but I think that if you listen to what others might have to say, other people might have information of what they want to see improved. So I'd have to gather more information.
Thank you. Mrs. McCabe.
What does equity in education mean to you? What experiences have you had in addressing inequity concerns, or tell us about an instance when you have demonstrated awareness of equity as an essential value?
So I watched the deep equity presentation this past week, and their definition being school outcomes, both positive and negative, are distributed equitably across the different demographic and identity groups. The negative outcomes are reduced for all groups, and resources are distributed equity across all groups of schools. So it's making sure that the resources for all students are there for all students to have successful outcomes. For what experience have I had addressing inequity concerns? Interestingly, about, I guess it's 17 years ago now. So as a resident in Denver, a pharmacy practice resident in Denver, I did rotations with the University of Colorado. And as a resident there, they were starting a cultural competence committee. And so it was training the trainers, and we met, I believe it was once a month, to train the professors in cultural competence. And I really enjoyed that experience. The experience of looking at who is your own identity, what group do you see yourself in, and then applying it to the students who are pharmacy students, and just how does that affect your teaching in the classroom. And then I took that that training, and it excites me, given my travel past, and I was able to give presentations a decade ago on cultural competence and in pharmacy practice. I just think it's essential, because if you can't communicate to a patient or a student, whether or not English is their native language or not, it could be that they are a native English speaker, but if you're not speaking in terms that they understand, then you're not communicating effectively. So that's my experience with equitability and cultural competence.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Fairview.
School closures, building repurposing, boundary changes have been a hot button issue in D303 over the last decade. Do you believe that more closures, repurposing, and/or boundary changes are necessary? Why or why not? And what types of changes do you believe are important to consider, and why?
For this, I would need more background information in order to respond in an educated manner. I do know that just from our neighborhood, what people would talk about, how it has expanded, and how the neighborhoods are further out, and where there's houses where there used not to be houses. So it's a changing target, but I would need more information to know whether or not that would be necessary.
Thank you. So that brings us to our last question, which is, what responsibilities do board members have regarding the evaluation of the superintendent?
So it's my understanding that the board employs and directs the superintendent, and as there's an assessment for this superintendent, I imagine there's a matrix that you look at to evaluate whether or not they're meeting those goals and they've achieved those goals, and giving that feedback when, if necessary or as needed.
All right, thank you. That concludes the questions we have for you. Thanks again for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Mrs. Barker?
Jeff Carpenter.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Yes.
So the first question is, please briefly introduce yourself and explain what skills and experiences you will bring to the D303 school board that you believe will add value to our vision and work.
Sure. So I've been an entrepreneur for the last 17 years. I started a learning and development company. So I've been in learning and development in the corporate space now for probably about 25 years. During that time, I've also been a coach at a high school, middle school, and at the local town level. I've also served on a school board as the president of a home and school board in the past, and have mentored many coaches and people in the learning and development space.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Barker.
The desires of the community, taxpayers, and the interests of school children are not always congruent. How will you balance the wants of the stakeholders and the needs of our students?
So that's part of being a leader in the community. You have to really balance both sides. So looking at it from the standpoint of your stakeholders and what are their wants and the needs, making sure that you listen to them, that they know that they're being heard, but you really also have to balance it against what's the good of for the children, the ones that you're working to educate for their future selves, for their future lives. And if you keep that in mind as you're going through those decisions and you make sure that you articulate that and communicate that over and over again, people, while they may not agree with it, will understand and allow you to move forward with it. So it's important that you really spend a lot of time communicating, spend a lot of time listening, and a lot of time explaining why it's the right thing to do.
Thank you. Ms. Weibel.
Right, thank you. What sources do you consult when seeking information about D303 schools or the district? How do you clarify and confirm the accuracy of the information you receive? How would you prevent personal interest conflicts from influencing board decisions and policy?
Sure. So I think the first thing you want to do is you want to understand all the facts. So when you want to get with the superintendent, principals, staff, teachers, whomever was involved in it, you want diversity of thought as you start to go through that so that you can look at things from different angles. If there is data that you can pull from, data that is not from, from any one individual, that also helps. But as you start to gather data and you balance it against each other, you start to figure out where the truth lies or where the information really is, so that you can have an informed decision as you go forward. From the standpoint of how do you keep yourself from any type of ethical issues that are there, I think it really gets down to your personal ethics. You have to hold yourself in high regard. If something comes in front of the board that you are related to or you have some type of tie to, it's important that you take yourself away from that and let people know that is, you cannot provide really a very clear thought process on that. And I think that says a lot when you can take a step back.
Thank you. Mr. McMillan.
Okay. What do you think are the curricular and instructional strengths of the district? And which areas do you believe need improvement?
So my background really, when I look at it, I did and taught instructional design, also curriculum design, technology training. Curriculum should always be evolving. It should never be standing still. So what I would say right now is the curriculum is probably very good without having any type of digging into it and really looking at it. I think every year it needs to be re-looked at and readdressed because we are readying children for their future selves, their future life, their future career, whatever that may be. And so things are changing quickly. Technology is changing quickly. The kids are changing quickly. So it's important that we keep up with them, but also keep up with where we see business going, where we see opportunities coming. So we can really reshape our curriculum to match that future. We have to be ahead of where everybody else is at. And you do that by really re-looking at your curriculum on a yearly basis, at least.
Ms. McCabe.
What does equity in education mean to you? What experiences have you had in addressing inequity concerns? Or tell us about an incident when you have demonstrated awareness of equity as an essential value.
Sure. So what that means to me is that everyone is given the same opportunity to succeed. That's really what that means. Now that can be different for everybody. So you have to really look at each child independently. Special needs children are going to have different requirements so that they are able to be able to succeed. Each child may be a little bit different. Some, if English is not their first language, require additional help. But all of those things taken into consideration, really, you want to make sure you have that equity, that they have every tool necessary so that they can succeed and move forward. I'll pull one from recently, an example from recently within my business. So we're working with a global company and helping their manufacturing, the groups that are really working on the manufacturing floor. So these are very unskilled workers that are trying to learn new skills so they can move forward. Well, after we did a quick analysis, we really realized there was a couple of problems with it. One of them is English wasn't everybody's first language. And secondly, they had several hearing impaired people that were there. So we recommended that we put together a curriculum that had no sound and no text in the curriculum. Those of you that have done this before, it was a different, weird kind of thing to do. What we found out afterwards is that the people that were hearing impaired, they said it was the first time that they'd ever felt that they could engage with the learning. 4 of them were promoted because of the new skills that they learned. And we saw safety rates go way up, but it's really looking to look at everybody and say, how can we help you get better? How can we help you do better and succeed and meet you where you need to be met?
Ms. Fairview?
School closures, building repurposing, boundary changes have been a hot button issue in D303 over the last decade. Do you believe that more closures, repurposing, and/or boundary changes are necessary? Why or why not? What types of changes do you believe are important to consider and why?
So without having all the data, what's in front of you as the town continues to grow, as the surrounding areas continue to grow, that's probably one of the hardest issues. Nobody wants to move their child midway through to a different high school or to a different middle school. And a lot of people have roots in, they went to a certain high school or they went to a certain, grade school. But what you have to look at is really balancing it based on the data that you see. You don't want to have one overcrowded school and one that is only half full. Those are the types of hard decisions, as we were talking about earlier, about being in good leadership, is really explaining why this needs to be done. One, to save cost, save money, could be that. Could be to make sure that we have the right teachers teaching the right children. And it could be just we're seeing a big balloon of people coming in and growth coming in one part of the city where we have to start to accommodate to make sure that we don't overpopulate or overcrowd one school over another.
Great, thank you. The last question then is, what responsibilities do board members have regarding the evaluation of the superintendent?
So I'd say that's probably one of the most critical things because the superintendent is really there to make sure the policies are implemented, to make sure that the things that the board puts together are implemented successfully. And when you look at, do you have the right superintendent, you have to ask them, are they a good cultural fit, first off? Do they share the vision and values and the mission of the board? And then really look back at their track record. Ultimately, they are the ones executing exactly what the board really wants them to do to ensure that the children are educated and ready for their future life.
Okay,
great.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Yep. Mrs. Barker?
Kelly Taylor.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. Please briefly introduce yourself and explain what skills and experiences you will bring to the D303 school board that you believe will add value to our vision and work.
Sure. Well, I'm Kelly Taylor. I'm a longtime, my roots grow deep in St. Charles resident. I have 3 kids in the district currently, both at East High School and Red Lang. And I'm really passionate about this school board and this district and this community. I currently am on the exec team for CAC, and I love it. I'm not afraid to ask difficult questions, as you probably know if you've seen any of those meetings. I teach at Harper College, so I am an educator. I've been teaching since I was 24 years old. I've taught as a sub here in D303 at Haynes, Thompson, and East before, well, maybe it was East at the time, I can't remember. My brain's half fried. I think that some of the committees I serve on at Harper help me and enable me to understand some of the things going on here in our district. I'm currently an ally to the LGBTQ students at Harper, as well as staff and faculty at Harper. I run the Graphic Arts Advisory Club, which has a very diverse population, from access and disability students to students of color to students that aren't really cut out for college that come to the club just to hang out at the community college level. I like to see silos being broken down. I like to collaborate, and I recognize that there's a lot of work to be done. So that's about it.
Thank you. Ms. Parker.
The desires of the community taxpayers and the interests of school children are not always congruent. How will you balance the wants of the stakeholders and the needs of our students?
That's a great question. So the very first answer I have to say and put out there is that the board's #1 purpose is to serve our students, the students of D303. And in saying that, the safety, wellness, and learning of those students and the outcomes that come of our students are very important to this board. Again, I will not ask the easy questions. I'll ask the difficult questions. Well, maybe the easy ones once in a while too. But I'll use facts, do research, and put forth the effort that's needed to represent the children in this area. I feel that open discussion, looking at policy, what's been done in the past is important, but listening, offering focus groups, talking to parents, and just taking a step back once in a while and figuring out what is really going on here. Is it something that's coming down from the top where we as a board don't have control? Is it explaining the process that we go through behind the scenes that people don't see when they see the result being presented in a 5-minute PowerPoint slide? It's important to understand the transparency of what's happening and why the community taxpayers are up in arms about something. Or is that something we missed? Is that a what if? You know, what if they're right? How do we look at that? But again, circling back into what is the best interest for our students. That's all I have to say.
Ms. Weibel.
What sources do you consult when seeking information about D303 schools or the district? How do you clarify and confirm the accuracy of the information you receive? How would you prevent personal interest conflicts from influencing board decision and policy?
Well, just like the few other interviewees before me, I'd look at the D303 website. I've been looking at that a lot through going through the process with the CAC and now the facility master plan. I would look for facts. I would resource the ISBE handbooks, the website, look at the 324-page board policy manual, of which I did not read the whole thing yet. I'm a self-proclaimed information junkie, so I look for, again, the facts. Excuse me, I have to put my glasses back on. Oh, and then, for example, something else that we did, and I say we because it was a collaborative effort on the CAC exec board. When that first started out, we didn't know how to proceed. We didn't know what we wanted to do, and we didn't know how we were going to do it. So several of us volunteered to go to our peer schools and see how their superintendent meetings are run and see how things are done. So look at our peer districts and also look at that information. How do I keep bias out? Well, you don't post on Facebook and you don't look at social media for answering any questions unless it's something that you're driving, okay? I do believe in responding to inaccuracies if there are facts out there. And I think that there's lots of other ways to incorporate the board's face into some of these social media areas, and I have lots of ideas about that. That's about it.
Thank you. Mr. McNally.
Okay. What do you think are the curricular and instructional strengths of the district, and which areas do you believe need improvement?
Okay, so I'll start with the improvement first because that's how I roll. I do believe that competency-based education is up and coming and should be utilized a little bit more than what it is at D303. I have a couple of students right now in my household that could really utilize this. They turn in a couple of late assignments, they get 100%, they don't get credit for those assignments. It's near and dear to my heart. And that's what number one improvement that is just off the top of my head because it happened 2 days ago. So there's lots of improvements that we can always make. Looking at the facts, looking at the data, we can figure out what those are. Now, talking about positive and strengths, we have a fantastic curriculum department here in D303. Their website with all the links to all the resources for K through 6. I wrote down a few of them here. K through 6 curriculum instruction website, instructional technology, the professional development website, the cooperative learning, and more. Our schools offer so many different things: culinary arts, music, foreign languages. There's even a Latin club at East High School. I don't know about North, but I would imagine they have similar things. I think that the library media, the clubs, the industrial tech, the family and consumer sciences, even our PE programs are fantastic. We offer dual enrollment at our high schools. We offer AP or advanced placement courses, which are hugely popular. Why? Because the students can earn college credit before even going to college. Our GPA system is different than some of our other schools in the area. So needless to say, our curriculum department is innovative, it's creative, and they even care about the different kinds of furniture that goes into their classroom. One of the teachers that went on the tour when we toured all the buildings with the CAC for the facility master plan, it said she would really like it if all of her students could see the board that she's writing on. And she said, so what we did is we tore down cabinets and we stuck whiteboards up in different parts of the classrooms so that we write in different parts so everybody can see. So that kind of ties into some of the equity and those pieces too. But I think it's, let me see if I answered the whole question here. Yeah, I think I answered pretty much the whole question there. Thanks.
Mrs. McCabe.
What does equity in education mean to you? What experiences have you had in addressing inequity concerns? Or tell us about an instance when you have demonstrated awareness of equity as an essential value.
Absolutely. Equal does not equal equitable. It's a lot of equals in one sentence. So knowing the differences is key. For the past 2.5 years, I've served on a literacy equity project at Harper College. We've created a Rebus portfolio. It's an electronic ebook. I don't know if it's fully published and aware, but D211 and D214 have been using it. Worked with a lot of different schools, high schools, as well as college and university. NIU is involved as well. I believe that equity and inclusion are so important. If the facts from the last meeting that you guys had don't tell us that, we need to just kind of wrap our head around it and say, how do we move forward? I understand there's a lot of different things that are offered at our schools in our district. Does that make it okay? Absolutely. Not all schools are going to offer the same exact thing, but they offer what the students need at that specific school. I believe that, let me see, what do I believe in? Oh, bias and barriers to success need to be broken down, okay? In the data that was provided at the last meeting, and I even assumed this was happening prior to that data, you saw many test scores were lower in those of color, those that have English as a second language, those that are socially and economically disadvantaged. These are just some of the little inequities in our district. About 5 years ago, we didn't have everything in Spanish. Maybe it was 10 years ago. I'm old, I lose track of time, but we didn't have everything in more than one language. Now we do. So we're moving forward and continually moving forward, which is amazing. When a better system will be created for all children when equity, inclusion, and diversity are improved upon. So I look forward to looking into how we can improve that. How it hits me personally is I teach at Harper College, and we're currently 100% remote right now, the whole entire college. So I've been offering to help students get laptops because I teach Adobe products, and those aren't necessarily usable with the Chromebook. We've offered hotspots, so I've helped students figure out how to log in. Actually, several of my students needed gift cards because they couldn't afford lunch, so there's food inequities. Many students in our district don't have parents like me that are able to work from home. They have maybe a grandma or grandpa, or maybe they're by themselves. So there's inequities all over the place. How to move forward? Make the teachers understand that there are inequities out there. How do we do this? Professional development, understanding, a little bit of guidance. Look at some of the anomalies that are out there in test scores and where do those students come from? Use that as the base to kind of say, this is where we're at and where we can move forward. I could talk about equity for a long time. Sorry about that.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Fairgrieve.
School closures, building repurposing, boundary changes have been a hot button issue in D303 over the last decade. Do you believe that more closures, repurposing, or boundary changes are necessary? Why or why not? What types of changes do you believe are important to consider and why?
So this is just an example, but I would absolutely require more data and more facts and more research and more entertaining the issue before I give an answer. But if the facts and the data and everything were there and it presented itself, absolutely yes. I would say yes to all of those things. After touring some of the schools, I've noticed that class sizes, the sheer size of the classroom is way too small in many of our schools. I've noticed that gym floors leak with water. I've noticed that not all of our schools are ADA compliant. What? Are you kidding me? So yes, I do believe that some repurposing, rechanging, reopening, reclosing, if the data and the facts and the student need is there. Again, being driven by the students. If it's too much disruption to our students, we shouldn't do it. Well, that's not necessarily a quote I would say. Okay, if there's too much disruption, well, kids are very resilient. And if you're making it better, there's a reason and there's a process, and going through that process is something that would be very important to do. I wouldn't just say haphazardly, let's just close this and let's open that. That's not what I'm saying at all. But through doing the work that's being done, change should happen. I agree 100%. ADA is just a hot ticket for me. Class size, half hexagon tables in a 600 square foot classroom with 24 students that are in high school that are, you know, it's crazy, but it's happening. So looking at some of that, how can it change is important. Yes.
Okay, takes us to our last question, which is, what responsibilities do board members have regarding the evaluation of the superintendent?
Well, it's the board's job to employ and evaluate only one person, and that is, at this current time, Dr. Pearson, the superintendent. But there is a handbook out there. You're not just left high and dry on this board. The ISB handbook, the superintendent evaluation process is out there. It steps and outlines everything that needs to be done. You need to review the written board policy, employee contract, etc. You also want to partner with the superintendent so that he is able to achieve the goals set forth by the board. Strengthen the relationship, communicate, offer open suggestions, answer your phone when he calls. These are all important pieces and parts that I believe need to happen. But to answer the question, what responsibilities do board members have regarding the evaluation? They need to evaluate the superintendent. He's the only one that reports to the board. That's it.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, thanks guys. You have a lot of work ahead of you. I appreciate all of your time and effort into this.
Thank you for coming tonight. Yep. Ms. Barker?
Joseph Lackner.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. All right, please briefly introduce yourself and explain what skills and experiences you will bring to the D303 school board that you believe will add value to our vision and work.
Well, it always sounds so formal when folks address me as Joseph Lackner. It feels a little bit like I'm in trouble. So I generally go by Joe, and I probably should have indicated that. So I'll know I'm in trouble with the board if you guys are addressing me as Joseph. I moved here to St. Charles back in 2014, and I've been a lifelong Chicago area resident. My family, my wife and my children and I, we selected St. Charles primarily because of D303 and the ratings associated with the quality of education here. It's well known that the high schools are highly rated, and that not only one high school, but both high schools here in the district are really well known. And we frankly had some luxury that lots of folks don't have to select where we would like to live. And we selected this place. One of the reasons that the high performance associated with these schools was attractive to us is because, unlike some communities, there's quite a lot of diversity here in St. Charles and in the D303 boundaries. And that diversity was a real attraction for us. If you compare with like-rated schools, not all of those like-rated schools across the state of Illinois or here in the Chicago area share that same profile. My personal background for more than 25 years, I've served as a management consultant, and my job is really to look at large, complicated organizations, help them articulate what their strategy and goals really are, and then to help them implement those strategies throughout the organization and to ensure that it's an efficient and well-functioning organization and that it's able to accomplish those goals. And so I feel like the thing that I have most to offer here is the real commitment that and understanding that education is a draw because it's such a foundational value for all the people in our broader community and in our republic to really understand how the world works and to see that education is a great leveler of society. And as a means for driving social mobility and socioeconomic movement, it's the one lever that we really have other than, say, a lottery ticket. And so the folks that happen to go to school in D303 really have their lottery ticket. And it's here, and it's this board's responsibility to ensure that that perpetuates. And I think I can help in terms of recognizing that this is a complicated place with an awfully large budget, many employees. I saw the number on the board today of 1,019 teachers. It's a complicated entity with complicated goals in a complicated world. And I spend my time thinking about how to reduce complexity into efficacy.
Thank you. Mrs. Barker.
The desires of the community taxpayers and the interests of school children are not always congruent. How will you balance the wants of the stakeholders and the needs of our students?
It's clear that no one likes to pay taxes. The higher the taxes, the more animated the resistance. So when we recognize that, we have to get into a conversation about cost value. And as a board and as an administration and as a school community who are the active participants, we have to recognize that the community in whole are stakeholders associated with this entity. And while community members may or may not have students in the district, they are part of the funding mechanism of this entity. And so it's incumbent upon us to really recognize that we have to communicate that cost value trade-off associated with all of the investments that we make here in a substantial and in a mature way. And I think that when the school community communicates effectively about those investments, everyone recognizes that it is in his or her best interest to get on board with some of those investments. And I think that whether it comes to special bond issues or other funding mechanisms in the levy itself, folks can be quite reasonable when the case is well made.
Thank you, Ms. Weibel.
What sources do you consult when seeking information about D303 schools or the district? How do you clarify and confirm the accuracy of the information you receive? And how would you prevent personal interest conflicts from influencing board decisions and policy?
Well, I think the most important source is Board Book. So that part of the website that talks about this meeting and these discussions, it's been illuminating to watch both the contentious discussions that the board has had over the past several months, and particularly since things have been effectively live streamed, to really see both the operational decisions that need to be made as well. And so I look really quite a lot at the conversations that happen in this room and in other rooms, and then as well at what you publish about the intentionality of the board as my sources. I think I have 4 students here in the district, and we've had the opportunity to experience Wasco School and Bell Graham School, Redling, now Thompson and St. Charles North. And so we have a network of conversations of people who are with people who are in those buildings. And that's not all of the schools, of course, but it's a big stretch of the schools here. And that helps you understand from various perspectives, not just the board's position, but the day-to-day operations in the classroom and in the schools. And so I seek those information opportunities. I know there's an awful lot that flies around, and I know there have been an awful lot of folks expressing their views around these meetings, and I think that's healthy. At the same time, getting to the facts is quite important.
All right, thank you.
What do you think are the curricular and instructional strengths of the district, and which areas do you believe need improvement?
Well, I think our experience has been mostly positive here since we've come in, and we've had the opportunity to experience lots of different programs. I think the district does well when it thinks about STEM issue areas and invests in things like the PLTW program. I think the notion of the rapid pace of change in technology in our society is something that we have to balance against the core educational functions of primary schools, and particularly of early childhood. And I want to come back to early childhood in a minute. The technology doesn't change, and it builds upon itself. And as we think about the STEM environment here, during the pandemic, the quality of education in STEM is really degraded because we lack the ability to co-locate, to do labs in a very personal and effective way. And I think we really need to look at what science and technology will do in our society and seek to keep pace with that part of the curriculum, while those elements of core education and how to be a learner and how to learn some of the basics are still well delivered. And both the consistency issue with the rapid pace of change in technology, I think, is the biggest challenge for every school to really balance. And how do you allocate resources across those two? I've thought a lot about the next question that's going to come up, and I'm going to address part of it here. There was an awful lot of information shared even in the last discussion about test scores and test results as a measure of different subgroups' performance. The gaps are clear. They're not arguable. One of the challenges I think that we all have to ask ourselves is why those gaps are present. And at what point does this entity, this social entity of the schools, have a responsibility to close that gap? Well, as soon as we're addressing children. And the question becomes, if we longitudinally look at a subgroup from the time someone enters to the time someone leaves D303, how much progress have they made in closing those gaps? And while the measures can't be the same, we don't have early childhood folks or kindergartners taking SAT tests, we have to recognize that when and where gaps originate, and what do we do as an allocation of resources at the earliest possible time to begin closing those gaps. And so when we talk about what we do well, AP classes are fantastic. Folks who are taking AP classes, which many of my own children are taking, those are fantastic. Those are kids who have great advantages already because they've made it through a good portion of the system with great success. If I think about the folks who will never get to the AP classes, I have to say, what interventions do we have in our tool set to get after those folks, to give them the best possible chance for success? And to me, that's the earlier we can go, the better. The more time that we can spend with kids in the classroom in an educational setting, the better.
Okay, Ms. McCabe.
What does equity in education mean to you? What experiences have you had in addressing inequity concerns? Or tell us about an instance when you have demonstrated awareness of equity as an essential value.
One of the big hurdles I think that we have in talking about equity and the entire conversation around equity is to recognize the homogenizing effect that the shared experience of school has. Being in school and your exposure to school is something that brings us all together. It's absolutely true that differences in terms of preparedness and in terms of fitness with the way that our curriculum is executed are present. At the same time, we have to balance the idea of common goals and common values. And so how do we balance this idea that not everybody brings to the room the same background, and yet we want everyone to have some shared measure of success? In fact, everyone takes the same PSAT and SAT test. There's one homogenizing or driving force of consolidation. What we, I think, have a responsibility to think about across all of the different and various experiences that students have in this district is how do we meet them in a way that says we understand what the standard is, and we understand that everyone brings his or her background to the community, the learning community. How do we prepare everyone to march toward that standard at a rate that is acceptable and is cognizant of the fact that there's differences? I think there's a real issue around bias and expectations and bias in execution, oftentimes that is unconscious. And so how do we use some of our resources to start to uncover some of those challenges? Some of the earlier comments about English as a second language and the progress that we've made as a district associated with English as a second language or English language and Spanish language instruction, I think is really important for us to recognize and to say, where are other communication issues impeding people's access to knowledge, information, and learning?
Thank you. Mrs. Fairgrave.
School closures, building repurposing, boundary changes have been a hot button issue in D303 over the last decade. Do you believe that more closures, repurposing, or boundary changes are necessary? Why or why not? What types of changes do you believe are important to consider and why?
I think the most important thing here is that the board has to bring a flexible mindset to the discussion around the physical assets of the district. It's inevitable with demographic change that physical building space will have to be reconsidered. Population densities and locations and the requirements that new developments in curriculum place on physical locations will necessitate reconsideration. It will happen. One of the things I think that's important for us to think about is back to the issue of the way that our society moves around technology, is how technology influences and either enables or impedes our ability to be flexible with physical locations. The relationship between the two, as we've experienced through the pandemic, is clear. I talked earlier about the science labs and the lack of co-location for people within science labs as a challenge. That's true. At the same time, our entire concept of what it means to be physically in school has been shaken up quite a bit here. We're going to take some lessons learned here and be able to apply them in the way that we think about all of our assets, not just the buildings and the windows and the furniture, but the technology assets that support the educational process. One thing that I think we have to put on the table here is that each student goes through their experience at D303 1 year at a time and only 1 year at a time. And when we make large-scale changes, it is disruptive to families. Entire family schedules are worked out around physical locations. And it's true that we also have some disparities in economic access, which means folks who can shoulder the burden of disruption well tend to be folks who have means. Folks who can shoulder them less well tend to be disadvantaged. And so when we think about those disruptions, we have to say to ourselves, who will this most negatively impact? And in their 1 year in third grade or their 1 year in first year of high school, how negative is that impact, and is it worth the payoff of the pain in that short run? So they're not decisions to enter into lightly, because everyone who is disrupted at that point in time feels the negative burden of that change.
Last question then. What responsibilities do board members have regarding the evaluation of the superintendent?
There are a lot of technical responsibilities, as the manuals will tell you. I think there are two primary considerations here. And one is that I think the board has to afford the superintendent some clarity around what it means to be successful in this district. And that is about communication of goals and of policy and of aims, and then the ability and the flexibility to have good discussions about those policy aims and what tactics will drive towards expected success. So my view would be that is clarity from the board to the superintendent. And I think all of the discussion about what the goals and the measures for those goals are for every one of those programs is critically important. If we say that we're going to introduce a goal of improvement in a certain way, we should at the same time talk about what the measures of that improvement will be. If we have a goal for diversity and inclusiveness, we need to have particular measures well understood and discussed about what we are driving to from those programs. And having the categories of the measures is one thing. Agreeing upon what level of movement from point A to point B in that category of goals is equally important because it creates clarity around success. Thank you.
All right, Mrs. Parker.
Joe Donaldson.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Please briefly introduce yourself and explain what skills and experiences you will bring to the D303 school board that you believe will add value to our vision and work.
Absolutely. I've lived in the district for 10 years now. I've have one child in the district and one entering next year. And I've lived in 6 different states and all over the country. And I have a very strong passion for education. And like someone else said before, we chose this area because of the schools. And my involvement the last year on the CAC board has really given me even a more passion to enhance education and to continue to move the district forward in a way that's positive. We have a great responsibility. Two things that shape kids in life are their families and their education. And I truly believe it is our responsibility here as a district to help those kids succeed in life. I get involved in schools that they're in. I have a background in Parks and Rec, so my a better part of 15 plus years, I've been in Parks and Rec and have worked with boards. I've interacted with boards. I've been a superintendent, supervisor in leadership roles. I've been a liaison to school districts with the Park District. So I've have a lot of experience in knowing how boards operate, knowing how boards, rules, regulations, and such. I've enhanced my learning ability over the last couple of years, being that originally I always wanted to serve on a park board. And because of where we live now, I'm not able to do that. But in order to prepare for that, I started attending conferences and classes on board ethics and boardsmanships and things. So when this opportunity came up, it was a perfect leeway into that. So I think I can bridge the gap, and create a nice balance between the community and the board and keep those objective opinions to help everyone.
Thank you. Mrs. Parker.
The desires of community taxpayers and the interests of school children are not always congruent. How will you balance the wants of stakeholders and the needs of our students?
Yeah, this is it's always been tough. In my experience, again, comes in the park districts, and it's similar. I think at an educational level, it's even more important. The financial interest of the taxpayers is very, we have to protect that. But our first priority is to educate students. So how do we do that where we can educate students and keep a high level of success in the state of Illinois and also protecting our financial assets. And I think you have to look at the needs, versus the wants, and, creating good fund balances in order to, have that financial need if there's something you see from an educational standpoint that we need to spend money on, while also protecting those financial assets of the taxpayers.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Whitable.
What sources do you consult when seeking information about D303 schools or the district? How do you clarify and confirm the accuracy of the information you receive? How would you prevent personal interest conflicts from influencing board decisions and policy?
Yeah, so first and foremost, we've heard it tonight. The website. That's it. Website, meeting minutes, attending meetings. That's where I gather the bulk of the information. Being that I have two students, I've lived here 10 years. I've coached, I've volunteered. I have a lot of relationships. I've lived on both sides of the river, and have a lot of relationships within the district at all levels. And I have a very good sense. I feel I have a tremendous sense of people and what they stand for, and how they portray information. And so whenever they're telling me something, I do a lot of listening. I don't respond a lot, especially if in a leadership position like this, and with my involvement in the CAC. So I listen, and you'll get to the truth when you hear enough answers. And I feel that I can gather that information and, process it and come up with, my own thoughts and based on that. So.
Mr. McNally.
What do you think are the curricular and instructional strengths of the district, and which areas do you believe need improvement?
Yeah, my familiarity lies at the elementary level, but I think curriculum in general is ever changing. Each year, it really needs to be looked at and evaluated. I truly believe in real life experiences for kids to teach them. You can have someone come through here and, they could be book smart, but we need to develop kids into responsible, respectful, and good citizens that know right from wrong as well. So while, yes, teaching them and learning them how to read and write, we also have to give them real life experiences. And how do we do that? Through our curriculum. There's been different articles that come up, getting them outside and doing outside education, hands-on experience. With this Empower program that, I came on the CAC at the tail end, it really excited me, and that got me going before we had to put a halt on that this year. But, those type of real life hands-on experiences, group work, interaction with others, problem solving, not just sitting there solving, a math problem, but real life, what they can use down the road to develop their personality and their experiences goes a long way. Let's see what areas need improvement. Just at the elementary level, let me go back to that real quick. I feel that we do a great job with math and reading and science. It's amazing how much my son has learned in the short amount of time. But I would like to see other areas, history and health and some of that stuff, put into the curriculum at different levels, because I think that's important as well.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McCabe.
What does equity in education mean to you? What experiences have you had in addressing inequity concerns? Or tell us about an instance when you have demonstrated awareness of equity as an essential value.
Yes, absolutely. Equity is including individuals from different backgrounds. So that could be, learning behaviors, opinions, personalities, whatever it may be, et cetera, giving them the opportunity to succeed is very important. So, and that it's a wide range, and it depends on the student, depends on the organization. I've been fortunate enough to work for very equitable organizations. Most recently in the Parks and Rec department, we work very closely with the special rec areas and the inclusion. So we develop the programs, and we're including people with developmental disabilities into our programs, whether that be, a Spanish-speaking student or someone that has autism. How do we include them without disrupting the daily lives of those kids in this particular situation? So making sure we can include them in ways that will help them succeed and move forward.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Fairgrave.
School closures, building repurposing, boundary changes have been a hot button issue in D303 over the last decade. Do you believe that more closures, repurposing, or boundary changes are necessary? Why or why not? What types of changes do you believe are important to consider and why?
Yeah, I think in the instance of closures and boundary changes, I think we really have to look at the numbers and see where those are going and the trends of those numbers. With the work on the facility master plan that we're doing, that you'll be presented here in the next couple of months with, that has a lot of good information that we're developing that will look at the repurposing. I was shocked when we took tours of the facilities. We're I feel like very sound financially district, top 10 in the 5-10 in the state. But we have a lot of deficiencies in our, our facilities. So where can we improve that? If that means, adding on or looking at building a new building, I think we do have to look at all options on the table and think big when it comes to that. But I think it'll really help looking at that facility master plan when it comes to repurposing or adding whatever it may be in that sense.
Our last question is, what responsibilities do board members have regarding the evaluation of the superintendent?
Yeah, it's one of the key responsibilities. The board kind of develops a map and the superintendent drives the car, but we have to be very good partners. We have to have a great line of communication. We need to evaluate and make sure that the superintendent understands the role and responsibilities of their staff, and that they know how, they're no better than the people they hire. So can they hire and can they, are they good testament of leadership and knowing who to bring in to do those jobs, because they can't micromanage either. And our role as the board is, we're here to set policy, not to micromanage and enact. We need to stay out of that. So I think definitely, we need to carry the policy and let the superintendent enact that policy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I believe, Ms. Berger, we're down to our last person. Can we just have 5 minutes real quick for Ms. Weibel?
perfectly okay.
All right, welcome. Please briefly introduce yourself and explain what skills and experiences you will bring to the D303 School Board that you believe will add value to our vision and work.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Scoobis-Doran. I am your closing number for the evening. I am a mom, number one. I had a big fancy intro to tell you all about myself, but when it came down to it, my husband went to my daughter and said, "What are you looking at?" Helping my mom with her application. My husband was like, "Okay, Olivia, what is she doing? What's your mom up to?" My mom's trying to make my school life better. I mean, give it to her, she's 6. So let's go with school life. Her education is better. And, you know, that's the reason we're all here. It's almost 8 o'clock in the evening. Everybody's here because they're a parent, they're investing in their community and their kids' future. And that's what I'm here for. I know I can help. I've been at my job dealing with people in terrible, vulnerable situations. And I've talked to thousands, millions, probably at this stage of life. And it's the ability to communicate with people from all different backgrounds, whether it be a woman who's disabled, a doctor, somebody, a police officer, who's coming off of a 12-hour shift. It's the ability to communicate and to make goals and, what achievements they want to hit a reality. And that's what I would bring to the board. I listen to everybody, make decisions based on all different kinds of voices. And it's that ability to make those decisions that I think I can help. At least I hope.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Parker.
The desires of the community taxpayers and the interests of school children are not always congruent. How will you balance the wants of stakeholders and the needs of our students?
Well, I think they're all one and the same. I think everybody has an investment in the district. Taxpayers without kids in the district still want the district to be better because it helps with their property values and what have you. So when it comes down to balancing it all, it's hearing all sides of the coin, I suppose. What does the community have to say? It's that open line of communication. It's setting realistic response times, realistic goals of what we can do. And it's also presenting that clear path of how we reach any kind of decision. Property taxes have to go up. Here's how we got to that point. It's figuring that out and having it so clear and concise and easy for somebody to understand that even if they don't have a kid, I don't have a 6-year-old daughter saying, "Hey, I want my school life to be better." It doesn't matter. They still understand how we got from point A to point B. Or I guess A to Z if you want.
What sources do you consult when seeking information about D303 schools or the district? How do you clarify and confirm the accuracy of the information you receive? How would you prevent personal interests or conflicts from influencing board decisions and policy?
Well, I am a journalism graduate. I was a copy editor far, far, far way back. When it comes down to information, it never comes from one source. District 303, of course, it's a wonderful website. We rely on it for everything. Board Premier for sure, but it's not the only source. Whether the information is correct, incorrect, social media does play a role. It's reading and maybe trying to get a gauge of what they're trying to say. And getting to the core of what's fact versus fiction, but it doesn't mean that the opinion wasn't given. So it's getting that information and getting down to the brass tacks. 1 source, 2 sources, 3 sources, take your pick. It's going to government websites, anything like that, anything that has some legs to stand on. It's just that clarity. But it is hearing from all different kinds of sources, not just one.
Thank you. Mr. McNally.
What do you think are the curricular and instructional strengths of the district? In which areas do you believe need improvement?
Well, my children are going to be starting in the district next year. The biggest thing, my daughters have been at Goddard School since they were born. And they've pushed a lot of STEM teaching and STEM education. That's one. There's a tremendous amount of clubs, even the coding club. There was that post a couple of days ago about free coding classes for kids of 6 and up. I mean, it's just stuff like that. That what they're learning now and the curriculum that they have now is not going to be the same that they're going to have in 5 years. Jobs that they're going to be applying for don't exist now. And so it's the maintaining and re-educating ourselves on what do we need to teach? What is there a better methodology of teaching? Is there a new source that we should use to teach? It's just the constant maintenance and the re-education of those. As far as strength, it's the clubs. It's the fact that 83% of teachers, I believe is what the fact sheet said, have higher education. It's a huge difference. Teachers that take it upon themselves to increase their education and take it to a master's of education or a doctorate in many cases. I mean, it's a huge draw for the district. We moved here from Chicago for the district, and I want to maintain that, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Ms. McCabe.
What does equity in education mean to you? What experiences have you had in addressing inequity concerns? Or tell us about an instance when you have demonstrated awareness of equity as an essential value.
Absolutely. The biggest thing, equity when it comes down to it in education, it's equal opportunity that doesn't equal effort. Providing the groundwork for students to achieve their best, and that best is fluid. It doesn't matter. You can't say, okay, student A and student B, you have to hit this level or you fail epically. It's a fluidity thing, and it's providing that groundwork. And effort doesn't mean equality. The students have to put in their effort to achieve excellence, and that's what I think everybody is trying to gain in the district. It's just setting that high standard of excellence. So what tools do we need to provide students to reach those goals? That's what we have to figure out. In my job, this is, in terms of inequity, this is all I deal with. It's the moms that are trying to figure out how to get their next paycheck because they're at home with their kids because their schools are not back in person yet. It's inequity it's one of those things that even in D303, we have such a crazy cultural diverse community, and being able to address those concerns and getting kids back into school so they can get those different voices and those different experiences should just be, goal number one, I think. So as far as in an instance, I've demonstrated awareness of equity every single day, every single moment of my life. At least probably 18 and up. We'll go 18 and up.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Fairgrieve.
School closures, building repurposing, boundary changes have been a hot button issue in D303 over the last decade. Do you believe that more closures, repurposing, or boundary changes are necessary? Why or why not? What types of changes do you believe are important to consider and why?
This is a great question. Everybody said it, and I'm going to say the same thing. It's the data, it's the numbers. It's recognizing that there's lower enrollment. It's making D303 to be the shining star of a reason to move to the district and to the community. When it comes down to it, what do the numbers dictate? It's one of those things that when you're looking at data, is there a hole? What's missing? Do we need to repurpose this building? I think the reason why is that taxpayers don't want to see their empty buildings. They would rather have it repurposed and open. And I think it's recognizing that. And it's the same thing. It's clarity. How do we get from A to Z? We got to go through all the letters, go through all the channels, and make it so clear to all stakeholders, students, administration, community members particularly. Here's why we have to reorganize. This is why. Tell us what do you think? What can we do to make it better? Tell us. You can't be a silent, oppressor here. Let us know. Contribute. Let us know what we can do. So before any major decisions made, we have voices from everybody and data, of course.
Thank you. So our last question is, what responsibilities do board members have regarding the evaluation of the superintendent?
Well, as far as the superintendent, it's job numero uno. And so what it comes down to, it's setting realistic milestones and setting those goals, and just email blast saying we want X, Y, and Z isn't enough. It's setting the checkpoints. It's checking in. Is there anything else you need? How is project A going? How is project B going? It's those check-in points and that continuous monitoring. So then nothing comes as a surprise. Something goes completely awry. You know how we got there. Seeing it coming is a terrible way of phrasing it, but it's been a long night. But you can see what happened. It's those check-ins where it's not just a blanket statement. And of course, it's using the state boundary guidelines in terms of the evaluation. All about communication.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That concludes our interview portion. On behalf of the board, first of all, I'd like to thank all the candidates that applied for this process. It shows how involved everyone is in this community, and we had an amazing list of candidates that were all qualified, and it's made our job very difficult. But we do appreciate everyone that's put their time and effort into this position. So we encourage you to continue to be a voice in the community and continue to champion for the kids. Then I'd like to thank the candidates that are here tonight. We appreciate your time coming in here tonight so we can get to know you more. As you've all learned, it's been a big process for us to get to know you, and we appreciate the time that you put into coming tonight. So with that said, I guess you guys are all dismissed. So, as I kind of mentioned in the beginning, we're going to go into closed session and then deliberate, and then I will reach out to all of you tomorrow and let you know what we decide. All right. With that said, do I have a motion to adjourn to closed session by roll call vote for the purpose of the selection of a person to fill a public office as defined in the Open Meetings Act, including a vacancy in the public office, when the public body is given power to appoint under law or ordinance, or the discipline, performance, or removal of the occupant of public office, when the public body is given power to remove the occupant under law or ordinance.
So moved. Second.
Mr. McNally and Mrs. Faircreed.
Doesn't matter which way. I think it was a tie. Tie goes to the runner.
Mrs. Marston, will you please call roll?
Yes, Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe.
Yes.
Mr. McNally.
Yes.
Miss Weibel.
Yes.
Mrs. Barker.
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim.
Yes, we are adjourned at 8:05. We'll take a